Welcome to another Maamar. We learned today in the Mizgeres of Project Melukat. These Maamar learned the Schus, the Nishmas, our beloved Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Cakiva Wagner. The Maamar we learned today is unique in the sense it's a hemshech of two Maamarim, the Maamar of Tanu Rabanan and Mitzvas, which is both Tafshel Lamed Ches, Shabbos Chanukah, Matzot Shabbos Chanukah, and Zois Chanukah. They are both mugged together as well in one Kונטרת, Chanukah Tafshel Mem Zayin. The theme of our Maamar is a classic Geshmak Chanukah Maamar, which we go through basically all the sugyas, the comparison between our Menorah and the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, as well as what exactly was the objective of the Yevanim, what was their goal, what were they trying to accomplish, and how would they do it. And based on that, how do we combat it? How does that translate into our Avodas Hashem today? Our struggle, inner struggle with the Yevanim. As well, the Rebbe concludes that specifically Chanukah is a special segula to bring the Geula HaMitzvah Shlema. So let's get right in there. We begin with the Gemara. Tanu Rabanan, Mitzvah Shneur Kalmenson. The Gemara says the Mitzvah Shneur Kalmenson, actually there are three stages. There's the basic Mitzvah, the Mahadran, and then Mahadran and Mahadran. The Gemara says the Machlekes. B'Shamay say you decrease. You begin with 8, with a complete Menorah, and then every day do one less. Mitzvah say fakert. You begin with one candle, and every day you increase one. Then the Gemara explains, the reasoning of B'Shamay is in the Beis HaMikdash on Sukkot, they as well had an 8-day holiday, and they would perform karbanis. There were the oxen, and they would start with 14, and every day decrease 13, 12, 11. Time of Beis Hillel, on the other hand, Beis Hillel's reasoning is the Ma'ila Makadosh. There's a rule when it comes to matters of Kedusha, we will always increase, we'll always add. So once you light a certain amount of candles, you'll never light one less. The question becomes, the Rebbe asks now 4 questions. Simple question. What's the comparison? What's the connection between the candles of the Menorah of Chanukah to the oxen brought on Sukkot? And especially when taking into account, the Tzemach Tzedek actually explains that the Beis Hillel is only arguing with Shammai about the comparison that he makes, not because he fundamentally disagrees with the comparison, it's just he has a overriding svara. He says, will override this comparison, but in other words, they both agree there is this comparison. The question is, how come? What's the connection? This that's explained in Chassidus sometimes. That the connection between the two is they're both 8 days. And Misbar 8 famously shows on higher than Ishtalshus, how you have 7, which is the basic cycle of life, 7 days of the week, 7 years in the cycle of the Shemitah. And 8 is higher than Ishtalshus. So here you have 2 Yom Tov, which are both 8 days, are both higher than Ishtalshus, so there is a comparison. The question just becomes further. You just move over the question to the next stage. So why are the 2 Yom Tovim, Chanukah and Sukkot, both related in the sense they're both 8 days, they're both higher than Ishtalshus? That's question number 1. Question number 2, our Menorah commemorates the miracle that happened in the Beis HaMikdash with the Menorah. Now, the Menorah, the Beis HaMikdash had 7 branches. Why are our Menorah, which is commemorating that Menorah, have 8 branches? Very, very strange. Third question, right? What did we compare the Menorah to the oxen? The Menorah we increase, the oxen, the Menorah we, just like the oxen we decrease, so do the Menorah we decrease. The question becomes, why are we comparing the Menorah to the Parei HaChag? The only comparison we found was the days, they're both 8. When it comes to the Menorah versus the Karbanis, they're 2 very different functions. First of all, they're 2 different vessels, right? The Menorah, so the location were very different places. The vessels used are very different. They're 2 very different vessels, especially when understanding the deeper meaning of every vessel. According to Kabbalah Chassidus, they are very different. The Neiris, the Karbonis, Avodas Shreinis, as well as in the Avodah, it's very different. To the extent the Abishah tells Aaron HaKohen, don't be disappointed by the fact that you didn't bring any Karbonis by the inauguration of the Mishkan. Why? Because your mitzvah of lighting the Menorah is even greater than theirs. Your mitzvah will last forever, will never cease, which, by the way, is it's embodied in the Menorah that we light today. Therefore, the Menorah is never bottled, because on Chanukah we light Menorah. Third question, basically, why are we comparing the Menorah to the Karbanis, which are seemingly 2 very different concepts? Why are we lighting it from sunset You do a dik bezed the neres hamikdash idlikum plaga mincha shavar v'yakein mashkia in the base of mikdash as well. Did it in the afternoon, but earlier when it was still light outside, an hour and a quarter before shkia, they came and Chanukah kanavne shanis hayu b'neres hamikdash v'frasha called Rabanan kein deraisa takun. Right? We are commemorating the base of mikdash's menorah, especially taking into account that Rebbe brings in the brackets that whenever the Rabanan instituted a minhag, something we do, a mitzvah, they try to make it as similar as possible to the original, to the Torah. It would seem to, the first question was the same amount of branches, and the second question is also light at the same time. So Kumtis, we have 4 questions. 2 questions which basically challenge the comparison between the menorah and the cows. 2 questions that challenge just the simple comparison between our menorah and the base of mikdash menorah. When it comes to the days, first of all, why are they both 8 days, and why are we comparing a menorah to oxen, as well as when it comes to the 2 menorahs, why is our menorah 7, the base of mikdash 7, and our menorah 8, and why is our menorah lit when it's dark and the base of mikdash is lit at light? What is the reason for all this? Ois Beis, the Rebbe is going to say the nekudas habir and everything, which, by the way, will only answer the 2 questions which are comparing our menorah to the base of mikdash menorah about the time of the branches. Let's see. You're right. Our menorah commemorates the base of mikdash menorah, but it's a very different type of menorah. It's here to illuminate in a very different type of circumstance. The whole story of Chanukah, as well, the Chanukah that we celebrate today is in Golus, is in darkness, it's after the Yevonim breached the walls of the Heichal, they broke into the base of mikdash, and they contaminated the Heichal as well as the Shemanim. The overwhelming darkness, right? The Yevanim's attack was to the extent not just did they contaminate the actual Heichal, the actual base of mikdash, they contaminated the oil which is in the Heichal. How do we know that this is, so to speak, next step? Shemen ubchinas kodesh. We know the concept of oil is the concept of kodesh, like the pasuk says, Shemen mishchas kodesh. Kodesh milig. Now the word kodesh, holiness, is not an add-on word. We're not saying kodesh would mean something is holy. Kodesh is the concept of holiness as its abstract term, which is a very holy concept, right? Just the nekuda of helikite, which is similar to the physical chemistry of oil, which doesn't mix with anything. In other words, it's a aloof, it's independent concept. Move on. So the fact that they went around contaminating all the oil is even a greater travesty, a greater downfall than even the fact that the Yevanim were matam the actual heichal. How come? Even we see also from the fact that after the base of mikdash was renovated and the base of mikdash was cleaned up and they were matarid, you still needed a miracle now to find pure oil. In other words, it's the next step. Right? They needed to find one pach, one jug, which was sealed with the seal of a Kohen Gadol, which represents a very high level of higher than ishtalshus. That in comparison to this light, darkness has no appeal. I'm sorry, I just skipped a few words. Even though the heichal, the Rebbe says afsha heichal. So when it comes to technically speaking, what is holier? So the heichal, the base of mikdash, is obviously holier than the oil in the base of mikdash. But in a certain sense, we see here that the fact that after being matamah the heichal, they went and were matamah all the oil, and the fact that we need an additional miracle to be matar the oil, to find oil tar, means there's a certain kedusha, helikai, kedusha milah b'gamei, which is in the oil specifically. And the miracle was higher than ishtalshus, like we said. We reached a level where darkness doesn't dark. That's the light is so great in this level that the darkness itself is illuminated. In other words, not just do we light up a place of darkness, but the darkness is transformed to light, which is something which we don't really have I don't think we have an example for that in Elam Azagashmi, but you can imagine Lui Tzur taking the energy of darkness and making that light. It's a much greater light, right? The highest Havaya, Yagia Choshki is able to make Choshech into light as well. So if that's the case, we're dealing with 2 different circumstances here, so to speak. The base of Mikdash is illuminating a lit up world. Chanukah, we're lighting up Golus Choshech, therefore now we'll understand why we light it after sunset, because representation here is after it's already dark. And that will also answer our second question. Why are we lighting It's our first question. Why are we lighting 8 candles? Why do we have 8 branches? And also, by the way, the fact that Chanukah is 8 days, is because the number of 8 shows in higher than Ishtalshlus, that only from higher than Ishtalshlus are you able to illuminate the darkness. The darkness itself shines and lights. Therefore, you need, first of all, we do it at night, and also we have 8. Just saying the parentheses here, it's basically bavarding. The simple question is, how do you ask why does our menorah have 8 candles? Of course our menorah has 8 candles. You have 8 days. If you need to light 8 candles for 8 days, but the Rebbe's question basically is, Hagufa kasha, right? Our question is not necessarily on the menorah, but Hagufa, why are the days of Chanukah spelled out in the way that it's 8, which is higher than Ishtalshlus? Why did the Eibush make a miracle for 8 days, which are higher than Ishtalshlus? Which, as a result, the menorah as well is 8. And the answer is, here we're dealing with a energy, the koyach, the ability a person needs to transform darkness is from a much greater and much higher place. So that's in the Kudos Abir, the difference between our menorah and the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. In the next 3 Aisias, Gimel Al and Hey, the Rebbe is going to go by Avodas HaAdam and explain to us what exactly Yevanim we're trying to do. And then after that, we'll explain to us how we combat it and how we fight it and what it means to us today. So let's see, Gimel. If you want to understand how this plays into a person's life, we'll have to first understand the explanation brought in the Maamar of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Why did the Yevanim go around contaminating oil? A strange way of fighting a war. The answer is because they had in mind an absolute spiritual war. The purpose wasn't to hurt the Jewish people, their body. Like we say in Val Nissen, the purpose was to make them forget Torah and to go away from the path of mitzvahs. Next step. Not just was it about Torah mitzvahs, it was about the elikus, the eibusher, which was within Torah mitzvahs. Like it's explained, we say your Torah. They didn't really have a problem with Jewish people learning Torah. On the contrary, it's right. Torah is wise. Torah is wisdom even among the nations. It is very impressive wisdom. It's very deep and intellectual. And that is how they wanted the Jewish people to approach learning Torah. And again, the Yevanim didn't have a problem with philosophy per se. On the contrary, they had philosophy in their own culture as well. They wanted the Yidden to forget Torah. Forget that the Torah is the Eibusher's Torah. So too when you take that next step. It wasn't just mitzvahs, but it was the elikus, the eibusher within mitzvahs. That what? It was the eibusher within mitzvahs. What? The fact that the mitzvah is the eibusher's will. In other words, it's about the chukah and it's about the ratzin. We have Torah, we have mitzvahs, the way it comes down into chachma and the seichel, there's a wisdom, there's a reason here. That's not their problem. The problem wasn't when you're doing mitzvah that makes sense. The Shnei Pirushim Bazad are 2 Pirushim, and what's Pshat? They attacked Chukim Davke and Ritzinecha Davke. First of all, the Mitzvahs, the Eidos Mishpatim, the Yesem Mitzvah Sichlis, the Schema Gama Yevanim. Right, so the more basic way of seeing it is you basically split mitzvahs into 3. You have the mishpatim, which are the rational mitzvahs, they were totally fine with. Eidos, which are sentimental, right, where you make certain signs, maybe cultural, that also they were fine with, because again, there's a certain reasoning here. Their problem was one category of mitzvahs called chukim, this is where they took issue with. Why does a person do a chayik? Only because Hashem instructed him. And then Rebbe says pirush beis ve'emek yeser, and a deeper pirush. They included all mitzvahs. We call it chukim, but we mean all mitzvahs. And as Rebbe says, is going to be in Eis Daled, why be'emes all mitzvahs are truly chukim. Let's see. Humans according to what's understood. Truth of the matter is, even the mitzvahs that are rational, a person needs to fulfill them because they are the Eibusher's will. It's not just about the person. These mitzvahs have a reason. You have to surrender to the Eibusher. You have to do it because it's completely above reason. In other words, you don't do it because of reason. That's not what we're saying here. It's not just we want you should do it because Hashem wants, but the mitzvahs itself, the emes, are higher than reasoning. They aren't here for any specific objective or purpose. It's just to fulfill Hashem's will, right? Mitzvahs are really higher than reasoning. Every mitzvah. Certain mitzvahs, the Rebbe chose to justify them, to give them reasoning, to bring them down into a world of seichel, a world of rationale, where things need reasons. Now that it's going to take it a few steps further, but just to sharpen the point that we're saying here, typically many people translate, or Kabbalah before Chassidus, the Rambam says this, is that the idea of a choik, something which is higher than seichel, is not pshat, is taka no reason. We don't understand, right? We are people that are limited, and therefore the Eibusher definitely has a reason for it. It's just something that we'll never understand. The Rambam says very, very strong that that's the pshat chokim, and if you say that it's taka higher than any reasoning, it's not a. The Rambam disagreed with it fundamentally in Meril Buchim. Chassidus is teaching that no, on the contrary, every single mitzvah be'emes is ratzin shomal mitam. It's taka higher than tam. Not just, we don't understand the reason, but there is no reason. There is no reason for it. And that's why the Rebbe, by the way, says in Ara 34 here, that the Yevonim didn't even have a problem with the Jewish people doing chukim, which is very, very interesting. How come? They were fine with doing chukim as long as you're trusting Hashem. As long as you say, I don't understand, but Hashem has a reason. As long as you're doing it for some sort of reason, Yevonim understood limitations. They understood that human beings are inherently limited, and therefore they understood not everything you have to understand. So Mishpatim I do understand, chukim I don't. That they were fine with. They had a problem with the mitzvahs that are ritzoi necha, the mitzvahs that literally, even for the Eibusher, so to speak, there's no reason, it's just something that he wants. But now that I was going to say, not just it's every mitzvah ratzin, and Elamai came down into tam, even the tam we don't understand, even the way it comes out of the chachma is something that's completely above us, and I was going to say that in a few levels. Even the reasoning for mitzvahs, the way they are in truth, the real reason for mitzvahs, something that you'll never understand. Why? What do we say? We have Ratz in Hashem's will coming down into Hashem's Chachma. Hashem's Chachma is something that you can't relate to. Befrat, the Eibusher's wisdom is endless. It's infinite. The Eibusher is one with his Chachma. It's not possible for a confined person, a finite person, to understand something that's unlimited. Like the times that in truth, even reasoning is higher than seichel, which is funny. It's a funny statement. Even the reasoning is higher than reason. Even the reasoning is higher than our understanding of reason. Elamai, the only places where a bit of it came down for us to understand is not the complete reason. It's not the real reason. The Rebbe says this really makes sense. The fact that I don't understand even the reason is also understood. Why? So you understand that you don't understand. So it makes sense to say that you will never wrap your head around the Eibusher's intention, the Eibusher's justification, the Eibusher's rational, so to speak, backing for a mitzvah. The fact that at times it is revealed and it's explained, right? Nisparish means that mamish, the Eibusher, so it takes his huge reasoning, takes a little bit of it and does give you havana. The pella is when at times it is understood, because for a finite person to understand the infinite, that's the chiddush. The fact that you don't understand a mitzvah, that's default, that makes sense. Furak chesed Hashem shegam seichel ha'adam yila eisa sagam b'zeh. The Eibusher did kindness. He wanted that a human being should relate to it, should understand it. Kumtais, every mitzvah b'emes is ratzah shamal mitam. Some mitzvahs were nislabish in chachma. And by the way, sometimes it says all mitzvahs were nislabish in chachma, but mitzvahs were nislabish in chachma. That level of chachma, that level of wisdom, Hashem's reasoning is still completely above anything you understand. A little bit of that chachma was explained to you, and that's a pella. We can understand it. Now the Rebbe says, even when the Eibush is going to take a bit from this tam, from the Eibusher's reasoning, and Taka explain it to you, you'll never understand it every detail. You'll understand the general mitzvah, you'll never understand the details. This is what the Rambam says also in Melukat, that the reasoning for mitzvahs are Taka all chukim. For example, putting on tefillin. Beautiful, it's a testimony, it's a but why black? Why straps? Why four? Why these parshas? You'll never understand every last detail. You see here, even in the bit of reasoning that we do understand, it's embedded. You could see in the dynamic of this of this explanation that you're basically revealing less than you're hiding, right? There's so much more here that I don't understand. There's so much mystery. Move on. The conclusion, the bottom line. For us, everything's a chayk. Every mitzvah is a chayk. Even Eidos and Mishpatim is a chayk. So basically, for us, everything's a chayk. Some mitzvahs have a reason, some mitzvahs don't have a reason, but us, we don't understand anything. Every mitzvah. And by the way, that's what happened. They didn't let us fulfill mitzvahs, right? Because every mitzvah, ultimately, a yid does a mitzvah because it's the Abel's will. A yid doesn't do a mitzvah because it's rational. They wanted to strip away, take away from us the hergish, the elikus, the yir shamayim that exists within a mitzvah. The fact that every mitzvah is performed because this is completely above seichel. So he wanted to take away the elikus from Torah and take away the idea, the feeling that a yid has when he does a mitzvah that this is something that's completely above seichel. Or he say, now we'll understand this storyline where the Yevanim literally walk in and start contaminating oil. What's going on over here? The mashmos, it seems from the Gemara, their objective was, let us impure all the oil. Let's contaminate all the oil, which is a very interesting thing for an army to do. Right? Instead of, vandalizing, destroying, we're going to start touching the oil. What's pshat? Ki heichal ubina al pikabal. It's mamash understood. Heichal is bina. Right? Chsiz explains, hey, right? You have yud and hey. Yud is chachma, hey is bina. Hey is hey chaf lamed. Chaf lamed is 50, which is the chamishim shari bina. So heichal is bina. Shemen in the heichal, that's the chachma. That's higher than bina, right? There's this spark, there's nekuda of chachma, which is higher than really, intellectual, the typical rational understanding. So the shemen, which is in the heichal, is like the chachma, the barak amavrik, the nekuda, which is higher than, which is, so to speak, within bina. Oh, so what was their point? They left bina, they left a framework of seichel, of rationale, but they take away the chachma within it. They're matame the shemen, which is in the heichel. The Jewish people should forget Torah, forget Mitzvas, should limit Torah, became Mitzvahs here, and they should only, in other words, they left the heichel. That's the Rebbe saying here. They left the framework of seichel. Torah could stay, Mitzvahs could stay. Let's take the shemen out of it. Let's take the mitzvah, the likus, the ebishter, the yerushamayim. Let's take that out. That was the Yevanim. That as well as the Yevanim in Avodas Adam. That begins with Bir in Avodas Adam Yuvan. So we'll see that. That's the Yevanim, that's what their objective was, and that's what they did. Question becomes, how do you fight the Yevanim? How do you combat this type of attack? So that's going to be the next few aces. For a person to overcome the Yevanim, it's not enough, the Aveda, which is rational. How come? Simply, the Yevanim attacked the rational. The Yevanim have been, so to speak, they're mitreif gemacht. They, so to speak, they were metame the seichel of a yid, right? They wanted it should just be seichel. So just fighting seichel with seichel, that's not going to work. The seichel, so to speak, is something that they so to speak, they override it. It's not even enough. Something which is higher than seichel, but still within the limitations of seichel. How come? Which is called ratzin sometimes. It's higher than seichel, but it's still, so to speak, within the realm of things that make sense to do and not. Why? There were three things here, if you remember. There was the heichel, there was the shemen shebeichel. They were matama both. They were matama the heichel, which is the wisdom. They were matama the shemen, which is makiv that's higher than the heichel. The one thing they were matama was the pachach shel shemen that we'll get to. But they were matama seichel, they were matama higher than seichel. The things that are higher than rationale, but still connected in some sense to seichel. There's one tool, there's one nekuda that the Yevanim didn't touch, and that is pachach shel shem, and that's Msis Nefesh. In Msis Nefesh, what's the concept of Msis Nefesh? It's not seichel. It doesn't make sense. It's not something I feel for, but it's just to stand. It's a commitment. Toikiv gadol, kol haminim ma'akvim. Toikiv atzim yishamal b'seichel legamri. There's no way to justify this extent of commitment and this type of submission. It's something that's completely above seichel. There's no svara that seichel ketanya that a person should give up his life. What is take? What's bringing a person to this type? It's not seichel. It's not higher than seichel. It's the nekuda of who a yid is. What is a yid? A yid is Elokus. A yid is Eibusher, and therefore me without Hashem, I'm not complete without Hashem. I cannot be separated from the Eibusher. So you can have seichel pushing you towards Elokus and kedusha. Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. It won't work in the fight against Yivanim. You can have higher than seichel, which is a tremendous drive, which is ratzin, which is again pushing you towards Avodas Hashem, Yirah Shamayim Torah. It's not going to work. It's not going to cut it. How come? The Yivanim, unfortunately, we're mitama that already. The one nekuda, one chelik, one Indian that the Yivanim didn't have the ability to touch was the nekudas hayadus of a yid. That not I'm inspired to connect to Hashem, but I can't be disconnected from Hashem. That's the etzem of a yid. It's not even a positive relationship. There's nothing about the Eibishter. It's just, this is who I am. I can't be disconnected. It's a shlila. Now coming to this level, this yichida, there's no pagam. There's no way of blemishing it. There's no way of being metamit. They manage to contaminate all the oil, but not the pachar shel shem, and this is the part that the chutzenim can't touch. Now the avodim system that's how you override, because that's the only part that the Yivanim will never touch and will never win. Now there's a Uru polling lips and the Rebbe is going to say, just like in the practical story of Chanukah, they fought a war. What was the war? It was an impossible war. It was a war of people who were insignificant, small. Militarily speaking, it was suicide, right? Nevertheless, it was Mesiras Nefesh, and that's why they won. So the Rebbe is telling us here, how do we win the Yivanim? With Mesiras Nefesh. How do we? What's Mesiras Nefesh? Pachas Hashem and Kumtes. By the way, also there's a chibur, a connection between the whole story of Chanukah. It's not two different stories where we won a war and then went into the Beis Hamikdash and we found a Pachas Hashem, and it's all connected. Through the Jewish people being ma'orer than Mesiras Nefesh, finding the Pachas Hashem inside of them to eradicate the Yivanim, eradicate the Eibusher's enemies. That's how later, as they came to the Beis Hamikdash, and the Yivanim were retame every chelik, every nikud, almost everything, they found that Pachas Hashem, that Mesiras Nefesh that was inside, that was untouched. Now the Rebbe is going to tell us how it happens. What's the quality of a nitzachon that happens when a person uses yichida, when a person comes with that approach? It's a complete nitzachon. The only way to have a complete nitzachon. Why? When you come with your mind, it's your mind arguing. Come with your heart, it's your heart arguing. When you come with the Mesiras Nefesh, it's every part of you. Every finger, every toe, everything is working with the etzem, because the etzem is the essence of everything. So when you have that up leg, when you're in the mode of Mesiras Nefesh, there's no part of the body that isn't on board. This is a yid that's Mitzvah Nefesh. The pasuk says, due to the fact that Avram followed, the word Ekev, which means because, could also mean the heel. Shoma. Ekev Shoma means his piyate, right? His heel, the lowest part of Adam Rishon as well. Hadeher Tzivei HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognized, realized, understood, appreciated the tzivui, the instruction of Hashem, meaning it was Mesiras Nefesh, it was etzem. It took through everything. In addition to the fact that it takes through the whole person who's fighting, there is no menagid. So what's pshat over here? What's nikudah? When you're fighting with seichel, when you're debating, so to speak, you're trying to convince your nefesh bahamis or goyim that there's a Eibusher from Welt, so saf kol saf, there's you and a menagid. So however much you'll convince the menagid, there'll still be a little menagid left. The menagid is not going to completely transform himself, right? There's still going to be someone who disagrees with you. You're going to impose yourself upon him, you're going to overwhelm him, but you're not going to change him, so it's not shleimus. There's still menagid. The Rebbe says here, first of all, first the kudah is there is no menagid comes to yichida. So there's no menagid, there's shleimus. There's a complete victory, it's only one side. But even more than that, even when you do lower yourself to face the menagid, there's no reality outside of yichida. So when yichida fights the Yivanim become makarim, right? The nefesh bahamis becomes the nefesh alikis. Everything becomes part of the reality of yichida. Kum deis, That's an Nitzachim Shleimus. So not just is it the only way to fight, it is the complete way of fighting. The highest, greatest, most productive way of fighting is when using Mesiras Nefesh. Now let's go back to answer our questions. We're going to go back to, by the way, re-answer the question we already answered. Earlier we said, it's a dark time, it's Golus. Therefore, we need to light it up through through 8 candles, a very great light, and when it's dark. But now that I was going to say Tiffer. Now I'll understand even more why it's different than the candles on the Mishkan. In their number and in their time. What's Chanukah? Chanukah is Yichida. So first of all, because you're using the higher the shalshas in you, the candles are 8, the mitzvah ches kosher, we know that the difference between the Beis Hamikdash style kinner, which by the way, everyone's going to explain what the kinner is. Kinner is a great way of being mamshech the Eibishter. The kinner of the Beis Hamikdash was 7, and the kinner of Mashiach is 8. The greatest, highest, most holy place in our world, ubefrat kinner shel Beis Hamikdash within the holiest place, you have the holiest object. In a certain sense, kinner, right? The kinner is his chov vav. Gemat Hashem avaya ner. It's the ner. It's the izgalus ner avaya nishvas adam of avaya ner avaya. Nevertheless, it was 7. What's pshat 7? 7 strings on the kinner, on the harp. Rak seder. You're the complete of the complete. You are complete yishalshus. There's no higher than you, but you're limited to the confinement of the limited, systematic way the Eibishter deals with our world. So it's integrated, right? Eternal. Therefore, it was 7. 7 represents, again, the cycle of life, the cycle of creation. All of a sudden, Mashiach comes, it'll be 8, it'll be higher than Ishtalshus. Because again, what are we here to do? We're here to transform. This is why the Rebbe says here, it's not just that the reason why we're lighting by night is because we need to light up the night, like we said earlier. The reason why we're lighting by night is because we need to make the night light. I don't know if you got. We're not lighting up the night, we're making the night shine. And for that you need Yichida. For that you need Yichida, which again, when Yichida comes, the approach of Yichida, everything's part of Yichida, therefore it's my Yagia Choshki, yeah? Davke, I'm going to read Davke, the Gilu, Shalmaylam, Yishtalshus, Mi'idim Gamas HaChoshech. Because again, according to the rules, according to the system of Yishtalshus, there's there's Choshech, and everyone is confined to its limitations. When you come to higher than Yishtalshus, it's a reality where everything is a prat and alakus, and therefore, Choshech is meir. Not just that darkness can't override it, not just that you're going to win, you're going to impose upon darkness. Now that I was going to add, the Gemara says there, when is the deadline? When you light Menorah? When the nation of Tarmadoi, which were a nation of Rashi says simply there were people who chopped wood and therefore they would stay around the market a little later. That is when the last people leave the shuk. Zokt Chsidis, Tarmadoi, Maamar, Tarmadoi are the letters, the same Oisis, Akteba, Tirmoid, Oisis, Meredis, right? It's the letters of rebellion. Tarmadoi represents the Goyim who rebel against Hashem, the lowest klippa. The Hey, Misakvim Bashuk, where are these people located? In the marketplace, Prinas, Shusarabin, Tur the Pruda, which is a place of division. Shusarabin, right? We have Shusayachid, which is a place of Yechidah Shel Elam, a private domain. Public domain is a place where there's a place for division in klippa. So you have the Murdim who are in the Shuk, in Rosh Hashanah. What happens through the candles? Nasa Kalya, right? The Gemara says, when do you stop, so to speak? When do you feel like, when did you conclude? And when did you, so to speak, fulfill the purpose of Menorah? When you're Kalya, when you the first period, like we said in the beginning of the Maamar, we nullify it, right? We annihilate it. That's like Kiloin in one level. But the second pirush is Sha'ur din Chanukah poel hakiloyin, kiloyin masher kleis hanefesh. So one step is get rid of the air, get rid of the chayshach through the air. Stage number 2 is when you can elevate the chayshach to the extent that it itself is meir. So that's why again now we understand Tifer, why our Menorah looks different than the Menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. Not just because we need to light the darkness, because we need to transform the darkness. Now. We'll explain now the Fragleich. Now we can get back to explain what is the connection between Chanukah and Pari Achag, and why are there 8 days? Let's get into it. Now you understand what's the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot, right? What's Sukkot? Sukkot is makif. Sukkot is 8, not just because it happens to be 8, because it's all about these galos of makifim. What's a sukkah? Sukkah is a canopy. It's overwhelming. It surrounds a person completely. It's higher than pnimius, higher than the rules, so to speak. Not just is it higher, but it's more than higher. It's higher than Pnimius, which comes into Pnimius, and that's the idea of the Shmini Atzeres, right? Atzeres is Netzar, it is eternalized. Ubedugma, which is basically, we see a combination here between Makif and Pnimi. We see a combination between a completely overwhelming, transcending Erev Hashem coming into Yishtalshus, which is similar to Chanukah as well. When a person is Meis Nefesh, we said, it's seeable, right? It's visible in every part of his body, in every part of the person. And Sukkot is the same thing. It's not enough to be makif, but you have to bring that makif v'pnimius, and that's how you, so to speak, break the rules of choshech and ur. You can make choshech itself light. That also ends up translating into the days of the Yom Tov, Mitzvah Shmeinahu Aleph Zayin. We see in the number 8 that not just 8 is higher, but the combination of higher and lower. How come? Simple question. If 8 is completely higher than Ishtalshus, why do you call it 8? It should be its own. We have a concept called Antuchad, V'lei b'chushban. Number, you're one that's higher than number. You're Yochid, yeah? Here we're not saying it's higher than Ishtalshus, we're saying it's 8. That means it's above Ishtalshus. It comes in connection to Ishtalshus, and after it's built, so to speak, upon the premise of Ishtalshus. What's Hakib Shad? The reason why 8 is called 8 is because it's actually the one that's above the 7, penetrating the 7. Like we explained, the Nes Chanukah don't just, impose upon, they're not just overwhelming and above, but they actually first extinguish, get rid of the Talmudim, but step 2 is to actually elevate Talmudim. Rebbe is going to say the same thing is very similar. Again, you find a striking connection here between Chanukah and Sukkot. How many oxen were brought all together on the Yom Tif? 70 oxen. 70 are the 70 nations. The purpose of the oxen were to transform the nation. The purpose in the oxen going down, the representation in the decrease, is the fact that the nations of the world decrease. So the first thing you're trying to do is decrease them, conflate them, calm them down. Yeah, a little weaker than they were the day before. After you, so to speak, annihilate them in that way, working slowly, on the contrary, you make them help the Jewish people, you make them recognize their purpose. Razal teaches us, if the nations of the world have just recognized and realized what the Beis Hamikdash accomplishes for them, what it does for them, how much brachas it brings them, they would have set up full security system. Battalions of soldiers would have stood around to guard the Beis Hamikdash. When you can elevate the goy to the extent that he becomes a person who recognizes the light, he becomes light, the darkness becomes light, then Kedusha is helped. Because again, when Kedusha is limited to the confinement of Kedusha, and Klippa is Klippa, so then Kedusha is fine, it's nice, it's beautiful, Klippa is Klippa, it's wrong, it's bad, and everyone is in its limited level how it's created. When Kedusha can be poil in Klippa, that Klippa becomes Kedusha. Klippa is elevated, so now the Nefesh HaBahamis, it becomes a Nefesh HaLekis, is a greater type of Nefesh HaLekis. You have the Koyach of the Shiur, you have the energy of Toyu, right? In other words, there's so much energy in the Gashmis, in the Klippa, in the Choshech. The Choshech that becomes Oyer is a much higher quality Oyer. Shmir Hamikdash, which that ends up guarding the Beis Hamikdash, which is guarding them, which is a crazy thing. Because again, why are the Goyim guarding the Beis Hamikdash? Because it's brachas they're receiving, but they end up adding Shmira into the Beis Hamikdash. But actually, that then the nations will serve, they will be productive, they will return to us, so to speak, they will shepherd our sheep, to the extent in our context itself, we see this idea where through the nations, Jewish people have 70 more karbanis. Yeah? So what are we basically just saying in the last race? Now we understand the combination between Chanukah and Sukkot is much deeper than just, we're not just here to be mayor the Choshech, we're not just here to, light up a dark world, we're here to transform Therefore, the 8 nights of Chanukah are very similar to the 8 nights of Sukkot, where we're here to elevate, we're here to transform. Just like the candles, the 8 nights are here to be mahapich the Yivanim, the Choshech, Rigot HaMedoi. The 70 cows are here to be mahapich and elevate the nations. And therefore, we need 8 and higher than Ishtalshus, which is again higher than the rules, higher than the confinements of Kedusha and Klippa. Therefore, you're able to elevate, you're able to make Choshech light, but at the same time, the Ches and the Aleph, the Zayin and the Aleph are combined. 8 is connected to the 7. It's above it, it complements. V'hine. We're going to conclude now. So it's primarily dealing with the darkness of Golus. And much more so, the double and triple darkness of the heels of Mashiach, the last stage, the last generations of Golus. So what is the Yirah of Chanukah for every single Yid? There's a purpose here. There's a goal. The reason why Golus is here is not Chas v'Shalom to punish a Yid. Golus is here to be Ma'orer, Mesiras Nefesh. Because again, if it's good times, Kedusha is Kedusha, Klippa is Klippa, and no one's bothering each other. When the Choshech is able to be Ma'orer, the Mesiras Nefesh of a Yid, then the Choshech can be Mahapach to Toiv. So the Choshech itself is fulfilling its purpose. Because again, when Choshech challenges a Jew to bring out the Mesiras Nefesh, that is its purpose. It gets elevated, which is a very geschmack of art. When Jewish people come together, most Jewish people, when all Jewish people combine with one mitzvah, so to Jewish people coming together and doing a mitzvah, this elevates the world, this transforms the world, and is goyim a tshuva v'atzalah. Now that I was going to conclude, which mitzvah should that be? Which mitzvah should Jewish people come together and perform together? This mitzvah is on every level connected to salvation. First of all, the human, Mashiach, is part of the 8 Nesiche Adam. The Gemara says in Sukkah there are 7 people who were anointed. 8 people are anointed, who Mashiach is one of them, the 8th. Shmoin and Neres Chanukah, which is combined, connected to the 8 candles. Vo'oid inni b'shayich z'mechad Neres Chanukah d'gula sida. K'moish Neres Chanukah imitil ha'olam. Kachem gula sida t'gula nischel shem shayich sheyach re'agolos. Another connection, in addition to Mashiach being one of the 8, the candles of Chanukah are never going to be extinguished, and never going to cease to exist. So to the Gula Mitzvah Hashem will be a geula internally, which will never end. As well, the third Beis Hamikdash is eternal. It will go on and never cease to exist. It will be eternal. So what does Rebbe basically tell us in our Maamar? We start with the questions. What's the difference between our menorah and the Beis Hamikdash menorah? Why we light at a later time? What's the connection to the 8 days of Chanukah, the 8 days of Chanukah, the 8 days of Sukkot, and the oxes that we perform? And the cause of our Rebbe is, first, the Yavanim were trying to take away the Holocaust, take away the Kedusha. The only way to fight it, to combat it, is to take that one tool they didn't touch. That is the Chiddush HaBenefesh. Chiddush HaBenefesh is higher than Ishtalshus. It's 8. 8 is able to not just eradicate Yavanim, but it's able to transform Yavanim. 8 is able to take the Choshech and make it Ur. When the Choshech comes Ur, the Ur is elevated in a much greater way. So the Chiddush, the Nekudah here is, we're mahapich the Choshech itself. So it's not just we need a menorah at night because we're illuminating the darkness. We need an 8 candle menorah by night because we're going to make the darkness into light, make the night shine like day, which will be experienced in its greatest form when Mashiach will come. May be speed in our time. May each have a wonderful day.